You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to this very special episode of the Dodge Movie Podcast, where we are peeling back the curtain and letting you see what goes on in our minds as filmmakers and what we were thinking about as we were making our films. So today we are going to talk about the 2016 A New Promise and the 2020 film Second Story. So in the same vein as I do all the movies, A New Promise is written and directed by Christina Dodge. It stars Abby Thompson, Susan Owens Duvall, Tammy Ellingson, Nina Carlson, Grace Malloy, Brennan Dodge, and Hannah Hummel. A pretty small cast.
Not a cast of thousands.
No. It was filmed in Shoals, Oregon at about 4 little locations. So let's just roll into it since we don't have I did not write a tagline for this film. Oh, I can give you the synopsis. A young woman is at the crossroads of a major decision and she makes an innocent mistake while trying to navigate the process of figuring out what is best for her.
Okay, the film starts with a title card inspired by a true story, so maybe that would be a good place to give a little context, or no?
Yeah, so I had the crazy idea. I was taking a producing class, and the assignment was to either make a film, make a sizzle reel kind of thing, or you could do a crowdfunding video. And at that moment, I knew that the following term I was going to be working on this film. And I think I'm pretty sure I'd already started the script. So I decided, okay, let's crowdfund this. So mind you, this is like January. I'm going to crowdfund. I knew I was going to film in March. And so I had to quickly kind of do all this stuff. So I'd written this film. My professor said to write what you know, because he tells this great story about this woman, one of his students who wrote a film based on the Troubles in Ireland, and she didn't do a whole lot of research. And that specific professor was very well versed in the Troubles in Ireland. And so she picked the wrong professor.
Right. He's made films about it.
Right. So I was so scared to write. Plus, I don't feel like writing is my strongest skill. I can write. I can have moments of brilliance, but I don't feel super great in it. So I was like, let me write an event that I experienced so that I don't really have to think about it. Does that make sense?
Well, you were using kind of the existing reality, the verisimilitude, to fill that in. So you didn't have to worry about getting the details wrong about your time in Belfast.
Right, exactly. And it was conflict. I know that a good movie kind of starts off with, or at least has conflict in it. And I remembered how I felt. And so I was like, oh, this is the perfect amount of conflict. So what happened was I was in college. I was babysitting for a couple of families. It was probably March or April. And I had told them that I would babysit their kids over the summer because they used the daycare center that was at my college. And that daycare center closed down over the summer. So all of the families would usually hire the students to babysit over the summer. So they said, would you please babysit the kids over the summer? I said yes. And in April, I had an advisor come to me with a job opportunity. And I said, no, I'm not finished with school. And she said, no, you really need to accept this job. And I said, no, you don't understand. I finish things. And she was like, no. And so anyway, so she convinced me. I went down, I interviewed. It was the job of a lifetime. It was making a lot of money with no expenses. I had my own car on weekends. The family would travel to Hawaii once a year. They had plans to go to Australia. I've always wanted to go to Australia. And so I was pretty much everybody I talked to said, you'd be crazy not to take this job.
Right. Well mentioned, I believe that you got your Australia swapped out for Europe, but
I did. Yes. So as I was trying to figure out what to do, and because the advisor had told me about it, it was kind of a little bit of a scuttlebutt within like all the department heads. Like everybody would, like different professors would see me and go, are you going to take the job? Like it was kind of like known, but not, because I hadn't told the family yet. So I was going to get ready to tell them, and somebody at the school told them.
Snitches get stitches.
Yeah, I kind of, yeah. There are people, not just me, who feel like they did it on purpose.
Of course.
But
right? That's what 20-year-olds do.
So I should have told them. It was kind of, I was young, and I just, like when you're young, you don't have the practice and the maturity to, kind of like rip the Band-Aid off. You need to tell them, like, even though it's going to be uncomfortable and they're going to be upset with you, you need to tell them. And so that was my fault, but I was like 19. So
yeah, a lack of maturity, you struggle with weighting things appropriately.
Yeah.
So that's, I think you just got trapped in. It was like, I don't really want to have that awkward conversation.
Right.
So I'm not gonna.
So I had this really uncomfortable conversation one night after I had babysat the kids, when she comes home and the mom says, I thought you told us that you were going to take care of the kids over the summer, and now you're backing out. Mind you, I keep saying it was April. She had 2 whole months.
And you're 19.
And a cavalcade of students.
But I want to back up. Like you're 19. When I was 16.
And Australia.
And I was working at In-N-Out Burger, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe these people quit with no notice. But the guy who was 50 years old who's running the store is like, no, this happens all the time. This is what happens when you hire 16-year-olds, right? Their lives are chaotic.
Yeah.
And volatile. It's what happens.
And so I have felt bad that I couldn't have fulfilled, because I am a person who values keeping a promise, but I also had to do what was kind of best for me. Plus, the added thing was I was leaving my mom for the very first time, and she's a single mom, raised me, well, my whole life, but as a single mom since I was 5. And so it was just her and I. And it's the first time I'm leaving home. Like, there was a lot in this like 2 to 3 week period of time in my life.
I mean, if we could have afforded it, it would have been good to get Wide Open Spaces by the Dixie Chicks. I mean, that was kind of what it was for you, was
very much
fleeing the nest kind of
very
thing.
much.
Yeah.
So I wrote a 17-page script. It was supposed to be 10. I turned it in and told my professor, I can't get it under 10. I think I turned in a 15-page script. I said, I've cut everything I can think to cut. And he goes, no, there's still more you can cut.
So I want to be clear that he continues to say that, not just about this script. He says you can always cut more. And I agree with him with one slight footnote. Obviously, there's got to be a minimum where your story no longer makes sense, right? But where his point is valid is that we get attached to our stories. And we think, no, that absolutely has to do it. And so I encountered this too. We can talk about this with the next film, about what that's like, about, you can cut more, or can you?
Right. And there were some parts that helped, because when I wrote I had the script written because I wrote it in his screenwriting class. And I remember asking him when I wrote it, because I was trying to be very smart as I went to film school. And when I took a screenwriting class, it was like, let me write the script that I'm going to film when I take the...
Yeah, that's called being brilliant.
So I remember asking him, are we writing this with like infinite budget? Because I had a scene at the airport, and I knew that if I'm going to film this, I'm not going to have that. So he did me a favor there, because that scene went out the window, because then we didn't have to worry about figuring out how to film it. Although I was going to try to film it at the Hillsborough Airport and try to.
Yeah, you're a phenomenal producer. If anybody could get it, you could. But it would have been logistically difficult to make the shots look right and everything. Yeah. And so I will say that I was just an observer for that original screenwriting class and that script. And it wasn't until the 11th hour that I really got involved in the script.
Right. So we're jumping ahead a tiny bit.
Oh, I thought we were talking about cutting it down.
So I, in February, did the producing class and did the crowdfunding. So I did that in a month at the last minute. So normally, if you're going to plan a crowdfunding campaign, I would recommend a good 6 months, because there's just a lot of ducks you got to get in a row. And so I was on like a super hyper track. And big shout out to Seed and Spark, because they were fabulous. The only way I was able to do it in a month is because they had this great PDF and I just did everything they said. There's a great YouTube video with the founder, Sarah. I'm forgetting her last name. And it was fabulous. It's exactly the masterclass I needed to do the crowdfunding. And so we did that in February. I go into the class, narrative film production, spring term. We're going to film the next week and we're having a table read. So as part of the class, one of the assignments is, and I'm like, can I go first? Because we're filming in a week and I need to know what everybody thinks. So we do the table read and my professor says, it's really good. I have 2 notes. Basically, I think it was at that point a 15-page. And he said, you can get it down to 10. He said, what about if you cross-cut it? And I was like, what? And he says, yeah, like what if you've got these 2 stories kind of going on and what if you did them in parallel? And I was just like, do you understand that I'm filming in a week? And I just I couldn't even wrap my brain around it. I think I was trying so hard to get through the crowdfunding. And I think by this point, I'm knee deep in it. We're in the middle of crowdfunding. So every day I'm having to post on social media and I'm having to ask friends and family for favors. And I'm saying thank you to the subscribers. And I mean, it was just, I was in the thick of it. And when he said that, I mean, my mind just blew. So I came home, cried to Mike. I was just like, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't even know how to do this. And that's when he was my hero.
Well, I was the Frank Darabont, a guy who was brought in at the last minute, the script doctor, because we had to do it that night. It was before we went to sleep. We had to have the script changed because of the schedule.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting at the end of the dining room table, pounding away on the laptop, how are we going to do this? We're going to cut this here and move that there. And we got it done.
I know.
But it was a little extra challenging for me because I wasn't as convinced that it was necessary for the film, right?
Right.
You responded to the idea of starting with her and then going back and filling things in, kind of almost flashbacks, right?
No, that's
to catch us up.
No, I was going to do it linearly.
Right.
That's how I tell stories.
That's how my brain thinks.
And so for him to say no, we need to see the start, but then pop back and forth. And so, but I see it now and I go, how this is so much more entertaining. Linearly would have been so boring.
Well, in that story, I think it worked. But also
that's why he is who he is, and he's made more movies than I, and this was my first foray.
Right, but we made it work, too. We worked on the script. We shot it,
Right. So and the whole time I was just like, is this going to make sense? Does this make sense to anybody? I mean, I know what's going on because I lived it. But does anybody understand why we keep going back and forth, back and forth? And actually, as I watched it last night, so we should probably get into it. Let's see, you did say the pickup line, right? Or no?
No, the pickup line. Hey, kids, put on your PJs and I'll come read you a story.
Right. So we're setting up that it's a story about, it could have, the one thing I worried about is it could have been a mom. There was something, I guess her age, because that's the other thing. I didn't cast kids because I didn't know anybody who had little kids.
Oh, and for your first film, you don't want to try to work with kids.
I don't want to work with kids. So we see her all by herself in the bathroom, she's cleaning up the toys from the bath. And then she reads them a story. And so we don't even see kids. We just see her come out of their room with the book.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant filmmaking. Right? It's like M. Night Shyamalan. You never see the alien monsters. They're always implied.
Right. And then maybe you get a little more context because then you cut to her. She's pulling in the parking lot of what is supposed to be the daycare center, but was my kid's school. Luckily, I had done so much work for the PTA. I pretty much had carte blanche of the grade school, which is a great thing.
Right. And I will say that was a really nice tracking shot when she pulls into the parking lot and parks her car.
That was one of those shots that we wanted to nail. And I feel like we got it.
Yeah, I have to say that when I watched it again, last night or the night before we watched it, I was surprised it was better than I feared, right? The cinematography.
Because we were still pretty new to all this. So the scene in the school, one of the actors is does that for a living, and one was my son's girlfriend at the time.
Right.
And so it made me realize this is why you hire actors.
Well, and if I had Lucas money,
She wasn't awful, but
I'd go in and digitally change that out. Right?
aw, well, it was his time in life.
It was. Yeah, it was. There is a difference, and this is not to in any way belittle the actors who are in your film, A New Promise.
Mm-hmm.
But when we did casting for the next film,
Mm-hmm.
we saw even more actors, and it was helpful for us to have had that experience to know, oh no, professional actors are worth it.
Totally. And I was an inexperienced producer, and I had no idea the wealth of talent that we have here in Portland. And I also underestimated. Now, I did pay my actors $100 a day because at the time that was SAG minimum, even though it wasn't a SAG thing. I wanted to honor my actors by treating them like actors. I didn't think I could get anybody to be in my film. And so I didn't put out a casting call. I knew of this girl at school who played my character, Abby, and I looked and she had an IMDb credit. And I was just like, oh my gosh, she must be really good.
Right.
And so I just reached out to her and we met and she said she'd do it. And then the person who plays my mom, she was in my producing class.
Right. And I just wanted to reiterate that we're not trying to belittle our actors.
Not at all.
We were lucky because we happened, you knew them through class, but we had that in. Whereas if we had just cast our friends in it, you would have known the difference. So years and years ago, a guy I worked with, his wife was working as a production assistant in, or maybe an associate producer. I don't want to sell her short, but in a production office in Hollywood. And I said, how do you know what's a good actor?
Right.
Meaning more like I'm going to the movies and the Oscars come out. How would I know?
Right.
And she said her shorthand was when you don't realize who the actor is in the role.
Yeah.
They lose themselves in the role, which I thought was a great way to talk to the layperson. But now having gone through making films, watching what they do, and Christy will back me up on this, I am amazed at actors.
Yeah.
I am like so in awe of their abilities and what they can do. And unfortunately, we didn't know kind of all the capabilities they had to give us.
Absolutely. My professor said to take an acting class to be a better director, and I do not want to be in front of the camera, so I did not do that. I learned so much from watching him, and I learned so much from watching you. I look forward to when I get to direct, and I do sometimes direct when I do even the commercial videos, but I was not as much a director in this film as I was a producer telling everybody what to do.
Yeah.
I was focused more on production than the story. We got our shots, but it wasn't getting that emotion. Now, I will say, though, I'm a good casting director because I felt like it was a huge coup when we watched the film in my class and I cast one of my friends because she had the energy of my boss. She had that same energy isn't the right word because I don't mean like high, low. She just had that vibe like that. She had the essence of my former boss. And so I just cast her and my professor said, is that an actor? And I said, no, it's just one of my friends. And he's like, oh my God, she's really good.
Huh. And maybe because I know her when I was watching it again the other day, I didn't have that same reaction.
Right. And then my other friend who played the mom of the kids I was supposed to babysit, she did a good job because people were just like, oh my God, were they really that mean to you? Like she conveyed.
Well, in her case, her son is a talented actor, so maybe there is some genetics there.
Yeah, well, I think she had been watching him, and I had talked to her about how they made me feel and how they,
it's also great casting because she too has that vibe. If you needed someone to be kind of stern and angry, right. she's got that.
So one of the shots I loved as we watched it back and we struggled with the lighting in this one room.
Right.
But I love the shot where she's cleaning up as we hear the voiceover of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And we track her from left to right as she's kind of just tidying up. That was one of those fun shots.
I didn't remember how much tracking we did in that shot. Man, I was brave back then.
Well, we were trying. See, that's the thing. I mean, I know that in filmmaking, if you have a variety of shots and it's just too easy to basically just, okay, this person's talking, let me shoot them from torso up. This person's talking, let me shoot them from torso up. Like, it just, that's how, and that is how most movies are. But if you sprinkle in these different shots, like different angles, different compositions, and we even improved on that in the second one. And I try to improve on that when I make my commercial videos and have different compositions.
Yeah, of course, I am a little bit afraid of going too crazy with some things, but I don't think we're there quite yet. And one of the other things is it depends on basically what your crew can do, right? So do you have the grips? Do you have the camera operator? Do you have the whatever to do some of those things that your mind tells you, wouldn't it be cool, if we had a shot coming up out of the bottom of the coffee cup? Well, yeah, but how hard is that going to be? And given your budget and your time and all those things, right?
And not everything works. Do you remember the shot we tried to get and we just couldn't get it?
Not
okay.
Just
so
that.
There's a device called a slider. And imagine.
Yeah. You mean, yeah.
Okay.
I totally remember it.
So what I thought would be really cool, because we have this shot of the mom comes home, and I wanted to add a little bit of suspense, because in my memory, I was sitting in the dark house waiting for her to come home. And so it was this very ominous feeling. And then they come home, and I actually, in reality, took a phone call from my soon-to-be future boss while I was babysitting the kids one night of my current boss. And so it very much had that cheating on the other person kind of feel. And I just was afraid of getting caught. And so I had written a scene where the mom coming home drops her keys, which I hear. And so then I quickly get off the phone. And so we tried to use a slider, which is like 2 rails, and you put the camera on it, and we had it on the ground. And we tried to time it just right so that the keys would fall in the frame along with her feet. And we tried it so many times, and we were all getting tired and just wanted the day to be over. And so we scrapped that shot because we just couldn't get it.
We couldn't get that shot. We didn't have the time and the gear and the experience and the whatevers we needed, right? We just couldn't get the shot.
But I have a great picture of you laying on your belly.
Oh, yeah. I remember laying on the floor trying to get it, right?
And then the sound, I guess now that I know so much more about sound, I wish that I almost want to go back and see if I can zhuzh it up a bit, but I probably will just let it be. And then the other note I made is there's an exterior shot of the affluent home. And I remember driving around I remember driving around a neighborhood of a bunch of really nice houses going, you think that one will work? You think that one will work? And it was, where could we position the car and position you to hide so that we could set up the tripod really fast?
Yeah. So this is, again, very guerrilla filmmaking.
I didn't get
I had the camera on the tripod, the legs of the tripod extended, right?
Right.
So the camera was on, it was ready to go, and basically just kick open the door, flap the legs open, slap it down, hit record.
Right.
Hope. Okay, done. And then we get back in the car, and I think you peeled out, and we laughing, and our hats were flying off or whatever. But it was, the funny part about that is probably no one was home.
Yeah, either that, or if I just knocked on the door and said, "Can I take the picture of the outside of your house? I'm going to use it in my student film." I just thought, as I was watching it, I went, I wonder if anybody would ever stumble on this movie and go, wait a second, that's our house.
That's our house. What the?
But what are the odds? I think when we watched this last night, like 7 people have watched this movie on YouTube. So I think I'm pretty safe. But hey, if you own that house, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Let's see some other fun stuff about the film. My oldest son plays, I can't remember what her name is in the film, but
Trevor is the name.
Yeah,
that
he
Brendan
plays Trevor, and he comes. The room he comes out of is literally a closet that was barely had enough space for him to be in. So then, and he had to stand there in
Pitch
the closet
dark,
while they did the scene until he heard his cue to come out and say, you have a phone call.
Now, the good news is he was in the plays and stuff in high school.
Yeah.
So he
did great. So it was kind of fun to have him in there.
Mm-hmm.
The teddy bear on the couch looks very creepy. And that's at the moment I went, do you think anybody understands what's going on here? And that's when the cross-cutting.
I actually loved that in like a, maybe not the way that was intended. Yeah, because I noticed that we were watching it. She's sitting on the couch on the phone, and then over on the left side of the frame, and his face is just poking up over the bottom of the frame. It looks kind of
I can't remember why
hilarious.
We left it there.
I don't know. And so I had some good framing throughout other parts of the film, but that was not my best work because it was just hilarious. This little bare face peeking up from the bottom.
But just after that, there's a scene that I remember us trying to time just right where somebody was in the car. Who was in the car? It was my car, but I can't remember who was in it. Maybe it was, I don't think it was me, because I think I remember being in the room. Anyway, we had to time it just right so that when she's on the phone at the moment at this certain line, that the car comes around the corner and you see the headlights through the window. And I was really proud that we nailed that one.
I was proud of that too. When I watched it again, I'm like, damn, that's really good.
Because I remember that one. That one took 2 or 3 takes.
But not as many as I'd think.
No. Yeah, I think only 2 or 3. And then I wondered, should I have added some ominous music, or that would have been too much when Tammy gets out of her car and you see the footsteps.
So one of my favorite shots, I think visually, is when Abby is beneath the tree.
Yeah.
There's this texture on the bark of this tree that's great. And there's like the white picket fence. I mean, it's PVC, but, behind her. And it's just a gorgeous shot. She's in the shade, so you get this nice even lighting. And we shot it from across the street. And it was kind of funny because we were trying to be really, really professional about it. And so we were being really careful that we were set up on the other side of the street. We didn't want anybody to get run over. But in retrospect, there's just not much traffic out here.
We did have a couple cars go by, though. People looking at us going, what are these jokers doing? Right. It's one of my favorite shots. It's the reason it's the poster. It's the reason that it features prominently in the trailer. It's just a gorgeous shot. We got lucky because I think it was like 2 p.m., which could have been for
it would have been outside of the shade. It would have been a disaster.
Yeah, it could have been some harsh lighting.
And then when we shot on the back deck, which is now gone, it's been replaced with a much better deck. Yeah. And that actually looked really nice
good.
too.
Yeah, that was another favorite.
That's why I said I was pleasantly surprised. I thought I would be
hard to watch
with the visuals. Yeah.
Because Mike was a cinematographer. I should have said that. He was the DP. Having only really been an experienced photographer, he hadn't really played much in the video realm. And I think too, I was still a student. I didn't know, we didn't have the language of what to ask for. We hadn't watched as many films, I think.
Well, and another thing is I remember when we set up for the shot across the street where she's under the tree.
Right.
And one of the crew said, oh, why don't you try something? And I honestly forget what it was. And I said, no. And they said, why not? And I said, because I don't want to screw this shot up.
Oh, yeah, it was probably Jeff. Because that's one of the things I love about Jeff is he's kind of like, let's do this. Like he always has like such great ideas.
And so But
you were worried to screw it up.
I didn't want to ruin your film. So there were things that we maybe could have done, but I think also part of that is to kind of be aware of the limitations of what you've got available. Right? And to stay within yourself.
Yeah. I do think, though, it's fun to try. I'll never forget. Mike and I wanted to do the shot, and we thought we could do it because Abby's car had the type of back seat that I think if you put it down, the trunk and the back seat were kind of like could be one. So if you put down the back seats, trunk, you would see what was going in and out of the trunk.
She had a Ford Focus wagon. It was a station wagon.
And so we said, put down the seats and we'll put the camera in. And when she puts the suitcase in, it'll come towards the camera. And a couple of my film friends were like, no, you can't do that. You break the 180 rule. And I was like, wait, but I've seen this shot in movies. So it has to be.
Right.
And now I wish that we had done it because I want to say in class when we watched it, somebody said, "Why didn't you do the trunk shot?" And it was just like, oh, you have no idea. We wanted to do the trunk shot.
And we watched one of the student films, and they had a shot from inside the refrigerator.
Right.
So it was the same idea.
It was the same idea. So let's see. We didn't have a smoochie because it wasn't a love story.
Smoochie.
There was no head trauma.
No.
And, there was a little bit of driving. You've already said, pulling into the...
Right. And then when the character of Madeline leaves in the Ford Focus station wagon, going up the hill, one of the things that we really were concerned about was whether or not her license plate would be shown. And I remember it was one you asked one of your professors, and they said, well, what would be the exposure? And you said, well, they could look up and see, what her real name is. And they said, well, isn't that in the credits? And so we're like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. But we did actually try to shoot some footage of her driving that I don't think made it into the film.
Because we live...
It's so hard.
It's so hard, you guys. I have so many minutes of footage. We live out in the country, and in the spring, we shot this in the spring, everything is starting to come alive. All the berry plants, everything looks beautiful, and you're just driving out with your window down, and you're passing these rows, leading lines. You're passing these rows and rows and rows of agriculture, and it makes me so happy to drive around. And so I wanted to have a shot of her driving around, and we shot it, but I couldn't, in the continuity, I couldn't make it work.
Well, and it's also the problem is shooting from inside a car.
Yeah, there's that too.
But we haven't given up, because I have a script which has an opening scene of the character driving in her convertible, basically in the same area. I haven't yet figured out how we're going to shoot it. The great news is we're going to hire a cinematographer and make him figure that out. Right.
So as far as the numbers go, we spent, $3,000 on the film total. It made no money. My poor husband, it cost him money because we didn't crowdfund for festivals, so we were in the red there. It does not have a score on IMDb, and it is 14 minutes long, which upon that first viewing in class, I thought my professor would say you got to cut. I thought it was 13 minutes. You got to cut 3 minutes. And I could not believe it when he said, don't change a thing, leave it the way it is.
Right.
That was a huge win for me.
Yep.
So it's rated G. It's a drama, I guess I would say.
Yes.
It's not really a comedy. We didn't, did we pause it when we watched it?
No, we didn't. And that's kind of not fair, because we've seen this dozens of times.
And it's only 13 minutes. If you can't get through 13 minutes without pausing.
You know me. I can pause in the opening credits.
All right. So I'm so sorry, because we're at 37 minutes. We probably should cut this and so we're going to wrap this up. You guys are getting a bonus episode this week, because we will go ahead and record us talking about Second Story, which I'm sure that we'll talk about this even longer because it was fresher in our mind, and there's lots of behind the scenes stories. If you guys have any questions about this film and you want to shoot me an email, I'm happy to share.
Oh, I love answering questions about Second Story. Just to be clear.
Yeah, so that's Mike at Dodge Media Mike or Michael?
Mike
at dodgemediaproductions.com if you have questions about Second Story. From a director's perspective, if you have a DP question from A New Promise, you could send him that. Or you can ask me at Christy at dodgemediaproductions.com if you have any questions about the writing and directing of A New Promise and the producing of Second Story. So stay tuned if you want to listen to Second Story. It'll show up on the same day. It'll just be a bonus episode.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.